Hello, everyone, and welcome to one of our favorite days of the year, World Sea Turtle Day. My name is Mark Swingle from the Virginia Aquarium and Marine Science Center, and I'm the program leader for the Sea Turtle Safe program of the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, or the AZA. SAFE, S-A-F-E, is an acronym for Saving Animals from Extinction, and our program and its 16 program partners are working to conserve an amazing group of animals that need our help, sea turtles. Today, I'm joined by several colleagues from the Sea Turtle Safe program, Kelly Thorvaldsen from the South Carolina Aquarium and Cassandra Davis from the Aquarium of the Pacific. They will be assisting today in making sure that all of us have a smooth and seamless experience with our World Sea Turtle Day presentation. So before I introduce our featured speaker, let me ask Kelly to go over some housekeeping information for today's webinar. Kelly.
Great, thank you, Mark. Happy World Sea Turtle Day, everyone. Thank you for being here. Little housekeeping, just a reminder that this webinar is being recorded. It will eventually be uploaded to the AZA Sea Turtle Safe Program's YouTube channel and distributed to everyone who registered. And from there, you can share it with your friends and colleagues, and we certainly hope you do. Please add your questions into the Q&A feature during the presentation, and we'll get to as many of them as time allows after the presentations. Participants can see all of the questions and actually are able to upvote a question if it's one you're particularly interested in hearing answered. And this is going to help Cassandra and I choose if there are more questions than we have time for towards the end of the hour. The chat has been disabled to avoid confusion between Q&A and chat feature. However, Cassandra and I will be adding helpful links into the chat towards the end of the talk, so you can have those for future reference. And with that, I will turn it back over to Mark.
I have the distinct pleasure to introduce our featured speaker today, Dr. Thane Wibbels from the University of Alabama at Birmingham. Dr. Wibbles is a world-renowned researcher on the biology and conservation of sea turtles and past president of the International Sea Turtle Society and the Southeastern Region Sea Turtle Network. I and his countless students and colleagues could share many stories of his amazing teaching and mentorship, and of course, those adventures in the field. Of special significance, he's an expert on the biology and conservation history of Kemp's ridley, one of the world's most endangered sea turtles. So with no further ado, to present to us the history and unique biology of the Kemp's ridley sea turtle, Dr. Thane Wibbels.
Thank you very much, Mark. And number one, it's a pleasure to be invited to actually give a talk here at the AZA's. Second, make sure I'm up correctly.
Looks good, Thane.
Looks good. Oh.
Yep. Well, it did.
Okay, one more time. One more time. We should be up now.
There you go.
Okay.
Go.
And again, it's a pleasure. Thank you very much for inviting me. I'll have a pretty quick pace talk because I want to cover the history of the Kemp's ridley and, as time permits, a little bit of the biology of the Kemp's ridley. And I will periodically, if you see my little picture over in the corner, be standing up because I actually do get very excited about this information. But I'll just say that the story of the Kemp's ridley is one where basically one of our 7 species of sea turtles almost went extinct. But it's not only a story of sea turtles, it's really a story of also of as much about humans as sea turtles. And the fact that, you know, I'll talk about a number of different people, and they all epitomize the fact that they're very normal people who did extraordinary things. And it gets back at the point that you know, a lot of us will develop passions, and if you follow those passions, it can really make a difference in a variety of areas, but in this case, the actually saving of a sea turtle. And so I'll do a quick general. The Kemp's ridley sea turtle has a very limited distribution in contrast to most other sea turtles, and its biology is tied to the Gulf of Mexico and Atlantic coast of the United States. All right. So the nice thing about this is that the entire life history occurs in that area. It's not a worldwide distribution, and but the oceanic stage, the near shore stage, the adult reproductive cycle, all of those occur within the Gulf of Mexico and Atlantic coast of the United States. So for all intents and purposes, we have kind of a signature species for our area. This is great. We've got our own kind of sea turtle species for the Gulf and Atlantic coast. And the interesting thing about the Kemp's ridley, and I'll get to this later, is that it might, although it occurs and lives in all these coastal waters, it migrates over to a nesting beach in the Western Gulf of Mexico, or should I say nesting beaches in the Western Gulf of Mexico. And so it's got a unique biology, and I'll hit that towards the end, but realize that it nests over at Rancho Nuevo, Mexico, about, a couple hundred miles south of Brownsville, Texas, etc. But the cool thing about the Kemp's ridley is that it has a really like a Gulf of Mexico and Atlantic coast specific evolution, biology, and in particular cultural history. All right. Humans almost caused the extinction, and humans saved it. Okay, which is pretty interesting from that standpoint. And the history starts all the way back, and I'll go beyond the scientific history of the Kemp's ridley, but when Linnaeus initially tried to name all the species, etc., in his Systema Naturae book, he came up with the heavy hitter sea turtles, like the green sea turtle, the leatherback sea turtle, the loggerhead sea turtle, etc., the ones you find worldwide. But he didn't get the Kemp's ridley. And one of the reasons for that was the limited distribution. It hadn't been discovered by, let's say, the scientific world, okay? The locals might have known about it, but not the scientific world. And so the history of the Kemp's ridley actually starts not over by the nesting beach in the Western Gulf. It actually starts all the way over in the Eastern Gulf of Mexico and at Key West. And hence the name Kemp. It was related to the history of a guy, Richard Kemp. All right. He grows up on out in the Bahamas. And as luck would have it, I think sea turtles were, he was destined for sea turtles. He grows up on Green Turtle Cay. And as a kid, I'm sure he's seeing turtles. They are turtling for green turtles out there. There are hawksbill turtles. There's probably an occasional loggerhead. You might even have a leatherback coming to the area, etc. Well, when he's about 12 years old, his father, who's a businessman, moves to Key West, Florida. Okay. And it turns out they live not too far from where the major turtle industry is. And at that point, Key West is basically the epicenter of sea turtle industry in this area, where they're shipping in green sea turtles, loggerhead sea turtles, etc., and canning them. Okay. It turns out, if you look where his house is, if you go to Key West nowadays, you can actually go to the Kemp house. It's a historic house, and it's just a few blocks from Turtle Crawls. And Turtle Crawls is where they used to keep huge turtles before they made soup out of them. Okay, rather than kill the turtle right away, they keep them. And so you can imagine they moved there when he's about 12 years old. And as a kid, he's walking over there and he's seeing all these turtles. The interesting thing is he's seen green sea turtles, and he's seen loggerhead sea turtles, and he's seen hawksbill sea turtles. And then all of a sudden, this other one pops up, and it's like, hey, this one wasn't around out in the Bahamas. What is this turtle? Okay. And so I think early on, he actually deciphers the fact that there's a different type of turtle. And he is, this is the 1800s. So this is the mid 1800s. I don't know how you become a sea turtle enthusiast in the mid 1800s. You don't have Nat Geo channel, okay? You don't have Discovery Channel, etc. But he's clearly a turtle enthusiast. And just to drive that point home, this is from his Bible. I did a lot of research on this at the county library down there in Key West. And this is from his family's Bible. And check it out. His firstborn son, his name is Joseph Turtle Kemp. And so you've clearly a turtle enthusiast if you're naming your one of your kids Turtle, okay, as a middle name. But the whole point is he's noticed that it's a unique turtle. And he's clearly well-read. He is in business and things like that, but he's clearly like a naturalist at heart. And he decides, hey, this is a different species that hasn't been described yet. So he's, like I said, very well-read, and he goes right to the top. He goes to the Harvard Museum of Zoology, comparative zoology, and he contacts a guy by the name of Samuel Garman, who is at that point one of the top herpetologists, ichthyologists in the world. Okay. And it's at the top kind of university for that type of study in the United States. And he says, hey, I've got a peculiar turtle down here. All right. So he contacts Garman. Garman, turns out, is the last student of Louis Agassiz. Louis Agassiz is one of the top scientists of the 1800s from the United States. He came up with concepts like the ice ages, etc. All right. So the stage is now starting to be set. And Garman indicates that, hey, I got this guy that's really enthusiastic and thinks he's got a new species of sea turtle, etc. The other interesting thing is when Kemp notifies Garman, he says, this is a strange turtle. It's peculiar. And the reason why it's peculiar is because we don't see it nest. I mean, no one has ever seen this thing nest. We think it's actually a hybrid, okay? At that point, they call it a bastard turtle, but a hybrid between a green and a sea turtle, okay? A green and a loggerhead, okay? So, and this is this is about 1880 or 77 at this point, okay? He not only does that, but he actually sends several specimens. How you do that in the 1870s up to the Harvard Museum, I don't know, but it shows you how much of an enthusiast that Kemp was. And he gets specimens up there. Garman sees them, and Garman's like, yep, this isn't like the other turtles. This has very unique features, etc. And as such, what he does is he actually names it as a brand new species of sea turtle, okay? And he names it the Kemp's ridley in honor of Kemp because of his enthusiasm toward the species itself. However, at this point in time, the concept here is that it appears to be a hybrid. It's real plentiful here. We catch it all the time around the Keys, etc., but nobody ever sees it nest. All right. This is 1880. All right. That's the concept. We have a species name now. The scientific world knows about it. All right. All right. And that's the beginning of the story. From there, it branches to another person who becomes kind of passionate or develops a passion for the Kemp's ridley, and that's Archie Carr. All right. Archie Carr historically is what I consider kind of like the dean of sea turtle biology, not only sea turtle biology, but sea turtle conservation. And the thing about Archie Carr was he was a very good scientist, but he was also a very good writer and communicator. And he wrote all sorts of books which caught people's attention, the common layperson on the wonders of sea turtles and the wonders of nature, etc. All right. He gets the first PhD in zoology from the University of Florida in 1937. All right. So realize Kemp's ridley's named in 1880. We now jump to 1937. Archie Carr is kind of a herpetologist at heart, not just sea turtles, but a wide variety of reptiles. He makes a lot of connections. He also goes up in the summers for like 7 years and does internships at the Harvard Museum of Comparative Zoology. All right. And he works with this guy, Thomas Barber. Turns out Thomas Barber is one of the last students of Samuel Garman. All right. So we're now kind of developing a lineage here. And I'm sure he hears the stories about the Kemp's ridley, et cetera, because Carr's down in Florida. So Carr knows, zoology, he knows turtles, et cetera. And then one of his herpetologist connections, a guy by the name of Stu Springer, notes that he says, hey, you got to come down here. We've got what we have. And Stu Springer's a shark expert. He's putting nets out in the Florida Keys. But he says, we've got this. And he describes it as an evil-natured turtle, okay? It's flat and gray, but it's evil-natured, okay? And this will get back. The Kemp Ridley's got kind of what they call an irascible personality. If you catch it, it just wants to bite you and try to get away from you as fast as it can, all right? And so he talks Carr into Carr, gets Carr's attention. Carr decides to go down to the Florida Keys in the late 1930s. So he goes in 1938. They've just opened the highway for the Keys. He goes down to the Isla Mirada area, all right, which is also Matecumbe Bay at that time, or Matecumbe Islands, all right. And Stu Springer, the guy who contacts him, says they call it the Ridley. I don't know where that name comes from. I can't find it in the books or anything like that, but that's the common name of this turtle in Florida, okay, or in the Florida Keys, all right. And so Carr hears about the Ridley. Carr goes out with a local, Stu sets him up. He says, here, Jonah Thompson will take you out. He's been fishing for turtles all his life. He knows he can go out and catch a Ridley for you, etc. And so Jonah Thompson goes out and catches a Ridley for Carr. But as he tells Carr, and this is 1938 now, they're crossbreeds. He says, we think they're a mate between a loggerhead and a green. All right. So this is now almost 60 years later. That's still the story on the Kemp's Ridley. It's a different species because it looks so different, but it's a miracle turtle. It just shows up. Okay. We don't know where it comes from. Must be a crossbreed, etc. All right. And so that's where Carr sees her first Ridley, and it starts tweaking his curiosity and passion, etc. So we have another person who's captivated. The other thing that Jonah Thompson says is that he says the other thing is you can't flip them over. If you flip them over, they'll break their heart, because the standard thing was to flip a turtle over, and that way you didn't have to worry about it. And these Ridleys will just basically flop, etc. And it gets back to their personalities, that quote unquote evil-natured one. And that's how Carr actually got to know about Kemp's Ridleys, etc. What it did was set the tone. And for the next 20 years, in addition to a lot of other sea turtle work, Archie Carr continues trying to figure out the quote unquote riddle of the Ridley. All right. He studies it in various locations. He develops this passion for the whole concept, the science of the Ridley itself. He goes over checks out Florida. Obviously, he's there. The Bahamas, northern Gulf of Mexico. He has no logical explanation for how you have a turtle that is abundant in all these locations, or at least in certain locations, and yet no one sees it breed. All right. But the beauty of it is he set the tone. Not only that, but he's put it into books. He's catching the imagination of people, all right, where they're reading it. It's like, how bizarre, all right? So he's been studying for a prolonged period of time, up to 20 years before we actually find one of the answers to the Ridley. And he considers it basically one of the most mysterious animals in North America, all right? Archie Carr develops a passion, sets the scene. Okay. Again, we're looking at like 60 years after Kemp. Next person up, guy by the name of Andres Herrera. All right. Andres is a businessman from Tampico. He has a ranch. He's got a couple businesses. His family, when we talked to him, says he was a self-made person, and he kind of developed the whole passion. But he's relatively wealthy. He had a small single-engine airplane and was an avid pilot. He was also a photographer, and this is back in the 1940s, okay? We're now jumping up to the mid-1940s. And he's got a movie camera, okay, which is not easy to have back in 1947, okay, as an example, all right? The other thing is, he is basically an outdoors person. You know, like I said, you don't have Nat Geo Channel. How do you learn about the outdoors? How does Archie Carr learn about the outdoors? At that time, they like to fish, they like to hunt. It got them outdoors, okay? And what they did was got in touch with nature. And that's where you really started actually some of the conservation, All right. And so he appreciated that. And because of that, he would take his airplane and fly to different places to go fishing, okay, or hunting, etc. And so he was very familiar with the various coasts of Florida or of Mexico. So over on the Gulf Coast, just north of Tampico, there was a place called Barra del Tordo, and there's a fishing camp at Barra del Tordo run by a guy by the name of Francis McDonald. And Francis McDonald tells him, hey, you know, this is a great place to fish. He comes in there and he tells him the story. He says, by the way, there's a place, you know, maybe about 10, 20 kilometers north of here where thousands of sea turtles come out on the beach. Now, Herrera is not a scientist. He's a, you know, like sports and fishing and things like that. But he says, thousands? He says, yeah. And he said, like over a 2 or 3 month period? No, like on a single day. He's like, no way. Okay. And then he says, if that's the case, that's got to be an amazing phenomenon. And again, he likes taking pictures. And he thought, if I can capture that, that would really be cool. And he sees it now a passion of, I want to capture this remarkable biological phenomenon for society. All right. And so what he does, all right, over a 2-year period, he flies 33 missions with his own airplane from Tampico up to Brownsville, Texas, and back, looking for this mass nesting of turtles that Francis McDonald has talked to him about. Okay. And again, not just like one day or something like that, 33 flights. I mean, this is incredible. His fuel, his airplane, you know, all that time. And finally, he hits the jackpot. June 18th, 1947, he's flying. And what he talked about, he mentioned, I heard him say this, and he's like, it was like confetti in the water. And now I know what he means because I've flown drones over that. Whereas those turtles roll, they get the shine of the water and things like that. And there's just thousands of turtles, and they're coming up on the beach. He has to go down past the turtle and kind of fly up to the southern boundary of it, okay? Because he can't land on the beach, it said. And it lasts for hours, and there are literally thousands of turtles. He thinks about 2 miles of beach for 4 hours or more, etc. This is the family let us see his flight log. And if you look on the bottom line on the flight log, 618, that would be 1947, 618. And he goes down to a place called Barra Calabasas, okay, which is just north of Rancho Nuevo. And he has a note in there, Tortugas. Yeah, understatement, all right? And so he now basically has documented this. And the story goes, oh, he didn't understand the importance of it. He didn't know it was a Kemp's ridley, okay? He didn't know that. But he knew the importance of seeing thousands of turtles out on the beach. He knew outdoors. He knew this was a unique phenomenon. And so he tries to publish it. I won't get into the specifics because we don't have the time. But the whole point is he went out of his way for several years trying to get people to go for it. And you didn't have the internet. And so it was very difficult. And so he finally kind of gives up. And he gives up, and it's not discovered for another 14 years. So 1947, he gets it. We're now at 1961 before it's discovered. And it's discovered because of another person who develops kind of a passion for sea turtles and the Kemp's ridley. And that's this person. This is Henry Hildebrand. Henry Hildebrand is a classic fisheries biologist, a biologist's biologist, okay? He likes to go out and talk to every person who's out doing the fishing and finding out what they've been catching, etc. So he's an expert on fisheries. He lives in Corpus Christi, so he's into the western Gulf of Mexico. He's fluent in Spanish, often goes down into Mexico, etc. And he was researching the history, or actually the abundance of sea turtles in the western Gulf of Mexico. And very importantly, he knows the Kemp's ridley. He's read Archie Carr's books. He understands the riddle of the ridley, etc. All right. And so he's talking to all the people in the fishing industry, etc. And who does he talk to? He calls and he talks to Andres Herrera. Now, again, this is 14 or 15 years later, but it's the same guy who's running the fishing camp that told Herrera, hey, there's a lot of turtles up here. And he's talking to, and the funny thing is that Francis McDonald, the guy at the fishing camp, says, hey, you ought to talk to this guy, Andres Herrera, down in Tampico. He's got this film that he's been wanting to get people interested in for, over 10 years or something like that. And Hildebrand's like, really? And he says it shows, lots of turtles up on the beach at the same time. So Hildebrand writes Herrera a letter and tells Herrera all about turtles. This is it. This is it. This is it. And Herrera says, yeah, no problem. I got a film of these turtles, and it might very well be that Ridley that you're talking about, something like that. And Hildebrand's like, can I see the film? And Herrera says, sure, I'll send it up. I got buddies. And so he gets it up to Hildebrand within a couple of weeks. And Hildebrand watches the film in utter amazement. The whole idea is you've got this mystery. Like I said, Archie Cars thinks it's the most mysterious animal in North America. All the people who do fishing know about it. Nobody's ever seen it nest, unless you're one of the locals down at Rancho Nuevo, as an example. And all of a sudden, Hildebrand flips on the projector, and what do you see? Thousands of turtles. There's panning of the beach, and you can see about a mile or more of beach, and it's just solidly covered with turtles, etc. All right. And so, two things. Number one, it solves the mystery of the nesting beach. Okay, that's the number one. But number two, it revealed something that the scientific community didn't know about, and that was the Arabata. Okay, and that's what was throwing Archie Carr off to a certain extent, because he didn't think about the fact that they were all nesting at one place, but not only that, but at one time, and you have to be there at that time to actually catch them if you're doing it. And so it was kind of an amazing end to the first riddle of the Ridley itself. All right. And he presents it at a scientific meeting in Austin, Texas, back in 1961. Carr is amazed and elated that the nesting beach has been found, and he flies in specifically for that meeting. All right. And so that should be the end of the story. It's like, hey, great, we found the nesting beach, no problem. Well, that's just the start. Okay. That was part one. Now we kind of advance to chapter two. And this is the fact that they go to the beach after hearing about the film. The scientists go to the beach, and the population has significantly declined compared to what Herrera had seen back in 1947. So now we're talking early 1960s. All right. Several people go there and note the fact that there's heavy exploitation of eggs. Durrell Adams goes and talks about one person collecting 20,000 eggs, and they're shipping them to the markets in Tampico. All right. And I mean, it's gold. I mean, you're just grabbing eggs, and you're going to get several pesos at the market for them, as an example. And so there's a huge exploitation, not so much of adults, but of eggs from the beach, large trucks, hauling thousands and thousands of eggs out. And so conservation started. And we always think, oh, it's the United States coming to the rescue or something like that. No, this is Mexico. Mexico started the conservation in 1966. Humberto Chavez starts it. And basically what they do, they don't have that many resources, but they're patrolling the beach. And they're doing it by foot or by horse initially. All right. 1966. So they start protecting the nesting turtles on the beaches. All right. The problem is the population continues to go down, in the 1966 on, etc. All right. And by the late 1970s, nests have dropped to below 1,000. Now, these turtles nest 2, 3, maybe 4, but 2 or 3 times a nesting season. So you're looking at about 300 to 350 females by the late 1970s. And this is its primary nesting beach. This is not like a green turtle nesting all around the world. Once that nesting beach is gone, the species could very well be gone. Okay. The closest any sea turtle species has come to extinction, etc. And the thing you have to worry about is the fact that this is not just a Mexico problem. The nesting beach is there, but this green area that's shown in that map, that's where they live and grow. And so you've got to protect them in those areas, the entire Gulf of Mexico. And as such, we have the start of an international program. Ignore the cartoon I had a student draw, but it's the idea of it had been around. Archie Carr's like, hey, population's down, we should probably do something about it. Henry Hildebrand, population's down, probably should do something about it. Henry Hildebrand talks to a guy, Bob Whistler, and Bob Whistler is the naturalist for the Padre Island National Seashore. And I didn't know this till Donna Shaver told me to, but they lived in the same neighborhood. So it may have been like an evening conversation while they're watering the lawn or something like that. But Henry's saying, hey, you know, the Kemp Ridley's in trouble. Padre Island would be a good place for it to lay if we could somehow get them up there to lay in relatively large numbers. All right. Well, that tweaks Bob Whistler, and Bob Whistler sends it up the chain of command to a guy by the name of Roe Wauer, who's at that time in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Roe Wauer later becomes the head scientist for the National Park Service. All right. And that kind of gets things going. And Bob Whistler's like, you know, it proved to be very important to the Kemp Ridley. And I'll digress just for 1 second and say that it actually has become extremely important over several decades, and that's because of intense conservation efforts by the National Park Service. So I'd just like to say that the National Park Service was instrumental in kind of starting this whole thing, and they rolled with it to the point that Padre Island National Seashore has become a major secondary beach for the Kemp's Ridley. Okay, where at one time, if you could find one turtle per year, you might be doing well. Now they get 200 to 300 on a good year. All right, and the whole point, or along the Texas coast. But the whole point is, it was started from this kind of National Park Service idea. The other thing is, Roe Wauer is up in Santa Fe, and also in Santa Fe, or take it back. He calls Jack Woody, okay? And Jack Woody, who is also in charge of that region, but Jack Woody works for U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, okay? Roe Wauer, National Park Service, Jack Woody, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. He calls Jack and he says, hey, we may have a problem with the sea turtle. It seems like it's going extinct, and we're wondering if we can do something about it. And what you have are a bunch of people. There's a lot more to this story, and I'm going to cut it short. But the whole idea, this tweaks Jack's interest, okay? So now we've got passionate people in Roe Wauer and Bob Whistler, and eventually Donna Shaver takes over down to Padre Island. And we've got Jack Woody now starting to think about it. And what he does, he'd later become the National Sea Turtle Coordinator for sea turtles. And he tells me, he says, yeah, I wanted to figure out what's going on, so I just kind of drove down to Rancho Nuevo and checked it out, okay? This would never happen today, okay? I'll just tell you, Jack was not a bureaucrat. Jack was in the trenches type person. And so he hears the whole thing, and he says, yeah, we might be able to do something here. He thinks, yeah, it'd be great to have like Padre as a thing, but he sees the really important thing here is we've got to save the main nesting beach because there's one primary nesting beach. But he sees it as a win-win situation. Number one, we could potentially start or increase a secondary nesting beach at Padre, but we do a quid pro quo where we tell Mexico, hey, if you give us 10 clutches of eggs per year out of the 2,000 clutches or something like that, or out of 1,000 clutches, we'll go ahead and send you equipment and people to help you on the beach where it'll give you support. And he sees that as a way of saving the Kemp's Ridley. And it did do, like I said, they're on foot and horseback at that point in time. And so that starts the binational program in 1978. All right. So in 1978, it starts with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. There's actually National Marine Fisheries Service. There's National Park Service. There's Instituto Nacional de Pesca. There's Texas Parks and Wildlife. There's a lot of people. And the whole point is what they want to do right now is recruit a group to help the Mexico crew. And so Jack goes to the top. He goes to Peter Pritchard, who's a very well-known biologist at that time, sea turtle biologist, Florida Audubon Society. He talks to Archie Carr and Lou Earhart, Doc, and they basically recruit a field crew from the United States. And what they do is they get a crew from Florida that's used to going out and doing loggerhead beaches, et cetera. And so in 1978, it starts out a binational program, all right, where they have, it looks like a ragtag group, and it was a ragtag group, but very dedicated. The guy in the middle with the blue hat, he later becomes National Sea Turtle Coordinator. The skinny guy without the shirt on, that's Jaime Ortiz, one of the best field biologists in Mexico. I can guarantee you that, who's still helping the Kemp's Ridley. So anyway, that starts the thing, and it picks up with other people. Rainier Marquez, shown here in the right, and also shown over on the right in the other picture. He heads it up for Mexico for over 30 years. The one to the left of Rainier Marquez is Pat Birchfield. He takes over from Peter Pritchard. Peter Pritchard does it for a couple of years. Pat takes over in 1980. Okay, Pat takes over. Guess who's running it today? the guy's still doing it he's running the United States team, okay, and interacting and trying to get as much support, etc. So again, you see a lot of passionate individuals, again, what I consider ordinary people who've done very extraordinary things. So we get an international team going, 1978. Great, we're throwing lots of turtles back in the water. Population continues to go down. What the heck's going on? We got a problem. All right. And what the point being is that you've got to protect the females and the eggs on the beach, but that's not the only thing. You have to prevent the human-induced mortality of turtles and their development in their developmental and foraging habitats. And where are those? Well, I'm going to jump back to Donna Shaver. And in addition to kind of the National Park Service, establishing a major secondary nesting colony, they were also instrumental in looking at the biology of the Kemp's Ridley. They put satellite transmitters on these turtles, and what they find is that they occur throughout that Gulf of Mexico and up along the Atlantic coast of the United States. And so they delineated these foraging grounds. Those are the areas you had to work with. And what did we have at that time? We had thousands and thousands of shrimp boats out there, okay? And because we had thousands and thousands of shrimp boats, they were catching turtles. Not only were they catching turtles, they were catching adult turtles. And that adult turtle is that 1 in 1,000 that's made it to adulthood, okay? And so what you have to do is somehow decrease that mortality, because you pull that one turtle, that's the same thing as killing 1,000 hatchlings, as an example. And so what happens in the 1980s, okay, is there's a development of the turtle excluder devices. All right. This is Jack Woody again, also with the Center for Marine Conservation. Mike Weber and Mary Del Donnelly were instrumental in this. It was a major battle, political battle with, for example, the shrimping and fishing industries. They did not like the regulations on them, etc. But Woody basically goes to Congress and just says, hey, this one's on you. The Kemp's Ridley is at a point right now where it may already be extinct biologically, okay? It may not be able to recover, but there's no way it's going to be able to recover if they keep catching at these rates. We have to put turtle excluder devices on. So we have turtle excluder devices now for all the sea turtles, but that's because the Kemp's Ridley precipitated it, all right? All right? And the whole point was actually about 1989, 88, it went on and off for a while, but by 1990, we had turtle excluder devices on all the boats. And like I said, it was a hotly contested issue. And I'll just give you a little dose of Jack Woody.
Or whether it's a sea turtle, they should have the same value. They're a distinct entity in the world. And somebody says, well, let's save them. You may find something like penicillin from, well, that's true. But I also like to know that we're going to have a diversity in our world. We don't want all corn. We don't want all sorghum. We don't want all lawns. And the same thing with our wildlife. You may not give a big hooting hell about an isopod, something called a Socorro isopod, but maybe somebody does someday. It's out there. It's different than anything else. And sure, it can be gone. You'll never miss it. I'll never miss it. But where do you draw the line? They say, well, forget about these. Well, how about these? Well, I think we'll save these. Well, how about these? Well, oh yeah, we're going to save these. Now, who makes those decisions? Somebody says, well, I like white birds, but I don't like blackbirds. I like sea turtles, but I don't like lizards. Dangerous.
I apologize. I always have to show Woody, and that just shows you this guy's not a bureaucrat. This is the type of person who really got things done. And so what do? They put excluder devices on in the late 1980s, right around 1990, and the population comes back. Okay. All of a sudden, we decrease the mortality. There are a number of other things going there with the shrimping industry where it was decreasing to a certain extent. But we all think, okay, fine, it's going to come back. All right. But there's a final kind of riddle in this, the riddles of the Ridley. Okay. That's the newest one, in that it's coming back like this. And the population modelers are saying it should continue going back up. And it did kind of go back up, like at Padre Island, et cetera. It came back up at Rancho Nuevo. It mirrored it because of all the efforts, et cetera. But the nice thing about it was we had a benchmark from back in the 70s, or excuse me, back in 1947. And the question was, what did the population used to be like compared to the way it's coming back right now? But how far is it going to come back? And what we did is we actually looked at that Herrera film and tried to estimate how many turtles were on the beach. And if there were that many turtles on the beach in a single arrabata, how many would there have been for the entire nesting season? And what we estimated was there should have been at least 120,000 nests that year. Okay. And, you know, when we look at the recovery right now, we think, hey, that's pretty good. But the recovery is all the way in the right hand portion of this diagram. And it's nothing compared to the way it apparently was back in the Herrera day. All right. And it's just bobbing around 20,000 now. It got back, and that's a lot better than the 702 nests in 1985. Okay. But we expected it to go to 100,000, and it hasn't done that. Okay. And as such, we have a new riddle in the Ridley, and that is, why is it leveled off? Okay. Why is it kind of leveled off? It's jumping up and down around 20,000 nests per year. You know, divide that, you're probably, you know, somewhere, you know, around 10,000, maybe less adult nesting females. And it could be a wide variety of things, but I'll direct your attention to number 4 here. And it could be simply changes in the ecosystem. That is, the Gulf of Mexico today may not be the Gulf of Mexico that Herrera saw. Okay, there's a lot more pollution. There's a lot more fisheries interaction. There's a lot more coastal development, et cetera. And so we're not really sure if this is just a temporary setback and it's kind of leveling off, or if it's the new normal. Okay. And the point being, this is why it's very important. We still consider the Kemp's Ridley a critically endangered species based on historic levels. It's decreased 90% or more, et cetera. So it needs to be monitored. And it's at a point where if something happens, it can very quickly decline, because it's not, you know, extremely high. It doesn't have a lot of room for buffering, et cetera. And so the question we have here is the last riddle is, will it return to exponential recovery and historic levels? All right. And I think, because of the time factor, I think I'll wrap it up like that. But I will just like to say, and I'm going to show one more thing and show you what it does, because of is that this is an example, all those people I told you about, an example of what I consider very ordinary people that were totally dedicated to the cause. They became passionate about what they're doing, and they did extraordinary things because of that. And they're not, you know, they're not different than you or I. Okay. It's just that they were at the right place, the right time, and they realized they could do something about it, and they did. All right. And so with that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing this one, and I'm going to share one other thing here, and that would be this. And I'm going to show you this one. This is now just a few years ago. And what it is a drone video on the Kemp's Ridley nesting beach during a major arrabata. Now, in looking at this, realize 1985, 702 nests over a 3-month nesting season at Rancho Nuevo. This is a single day after conservation. Conservation is identifying the threats, addressing the threats, and once you've addressed it, it will give the population the ability to survive and start coming back. Each one of those little dots in the water those are Kemp's ridleys. The group on the beach are conservationists. They're already saying like, come on up, come on up. And then all of a sudden the arabata starts. All right. And again, there was a time when there was no thought that this would ever occur again in the Kemp's ridley. And now they're regularly getting at least a couple large arabatas per year. And what you can see are thousands of turtles. And as you look at these turtles, I mean, one turtle might be from Alabama. The next one might be from Florida. The next one may be from Bay of Campeche, okay? The next one may be from Louisiana. They're all converging. It's this amazing biology where you have a quote-unquote pan-specific migration to a central nesting beach. I don't have time to get into all the biology. That's another half-hour, 45-minute talk. But the point being, they've got built-in mechanisms too. A lot of these turtles right now are going back in the water without nesting because it's like, it's too busy. I'll come down and go down the beach a little bit and pop back up. They're also the fastest of the nesting turtles. They nest during the day to avoid predation. They nest very quickly to avoid predation. And so it's just from a biological standpoint, it's just a really cool species. And the other thing is from a historical standpoint, it's a cool species. One of the, very mysterious its entire period. And then it almost goes extinct. I mean, again, down to about 200 nesting females at the most. And with that, I think I'll wrap it up from a time standpoint. And thank you all for your attention. And I think that we'll potentially handle questions at this point in time. And I think the crew will take back over.
All right. Thanks so much, Thane. That was just wonderful. What an amazing history this turtle has. I think it's got to be one of the great conservation stories still ongoing. I mean, it's still a story that we have yet to hopefully see the final chapters of it yet, but it's certainly an amazing story. Kelly and/or Cassandra, do you have a question or two for Thane?
Absolutely. And I think we have a couple that are very fitting for where you closed at because they were all about nesting. And so Wilma asks, do the Kemps occasionally nest at night or before dawn? Do we know that? Or is it only during the day?
No, you definitely can. They've actually had arabatas spill over into the night, etc. But it is the only sea turtle that habitually nests during the day. And the majority of the arabatas, like the crew on the beach will be sitting there in the morning and they'll like, getting pretty windy. We better get everything mobilized here. We could have an arabata today. And that was one of the things Hildebrand and Carr noted was like, the whole idea that they nest not only during the day, and again, very quickly, but also on windy days. And the whole point was it seems to cover things up. And a lot of times you get a little bit more wind during the day as the change in temperatures, et cetera. So yes, they can nest at night, but they typically do not.
Amazing presentation. Another question is, how many eggs do Kemp's ridley usually lay in one nest?
Typically, Kemp's ridley will lay about 100 eggs, all right? And then it goes back out, okay? Actually, I was supposed to meet with my graduate students today on this. They nest about 2 to 3 times per nesting season, okay? And as such, that turtle lays 100 eggs, covers it up, goes back out in the ocean, and within about 48 hours, ovulates another 100 eggs. And the thought process here was, if they're only, if our population's decreasing, are they coming back just, like every 2 years or maybe 4 years instead of 2 years, or are they laying fewer nests? And it looks like they're laying the same number of nests that they may have been laying back in the Herrera era. But data from like Donna Shaver satellite telemetry suggests some of them may be coming back less frequently. That is, if I'm over in Florida, it's like, if I'm going to migrate all the way across the Gulf of Mexico, I want to make sure I got plenty of eggs that I can lay, okay? And so I might take another year off and then go, because then I know I can lay three clutches. So the whole point is they'll lay 100 eggs, but then they come back and lay another 100 eggs 2 or 3 weeks later at the next arabata.
That is
Right.
incredible. Oh, go ahead,
Yeah.
Mark.
Yeah, I have a question to throw into the mix here. I couldn't help but notice in your graphs, Thane, that 2010 was the year that the sort of exponential growth of the turtle seemed to stop, and then since then it's bounced around a bit, and certainly there was a major environmental catastrophe that year with the big oil spill in the Gulf. I don't know that there's a specific direct link, but certainly there are potential impacts for a species like the ridley, which calls the Gulf of Mexico its home. And I didn't know if you had any comments on that.
Yeah, no, the Deepwater Horizon oil spill, it occurred at a time where a lot of the turtles were probably down in Mexico, but based on, again, Donna Shaver and the National Park Service's work, that's the major migratory corridor. Two things. When the majority of hatchlings come off the beach, it's usually a little bit later in the summer. Often the currents are heading north. Okay. If you saw Finding Nemo, I think there was like Crush was in some sort of current that took off and off of Australia. Well, I call it the Ngom Express. Okay. And what you have is an express current that is taking all these little hatchlings up into the northern Gulf of Mexico. Not only that, but what you have is all the adult females that came from Louisiana and Texas and Alabama and Florida, et cetera, are migrating right through what was the area right where the Deepwater Horizon oil spill was. And so it definitely, based on NOAA's estimates, had a major impact. Now, will it recover? Will it take longer to recover? Are we still seeing parts of that? We're not sure. That's why it's still a riddle. I mean, this is the thing, is like, based on Herrera's Arabata, we shouldn't be at carrying capacity right now, but maybe we are. Yeah. But yeah, absolutely positively.
And I had, go ahead, Kelly.
Well, there are a couple of questions wanting to know, excuse me, what the turtle is in the aquarium behind you.
That is
good observations.
Yeah, that is a red-eared slider and a map turtle. Yeah. They started out as little hatchlings, and I actually, believe it or not, there's a fish in there. This has nothing to do with the seminar. There's a fish in there I put in there like 18 years ago, and it is now this big. Okay, so the aquarium's been there for a long time. Yeah.
That is
Was there another question?
Yeah,
Cassandra?
we've got a few more.
Okay.
And continuing the theme of asking about the nestings, there's a question: what is the advantage of nesting in these large aribatas? Don't the females dig up each other's nests, or is there damage? How does that work?
This is perfect because it's working into all the stuff I didn't have time to give. All right. So yes, that was a great segue. I paid that person for the question. So yes, number one, the thought process is they're nesting in arabatas because it might increase the ability to mate and things like that because you're congregating. Well, we've shown with drone flights is they migrate all across the Gulf of Mexico, and then they somehow know how to congregate together, because the arabata can occur anywhere on like a 20-kilometer stretch of beach. It can move up and down, but the turtles are in multiple cores. That is, there's some sort of density dependent phenomenon, and they get into that core, so they know how to do that. And what we think it is that they may need to nest in the western Gulf of Mexico. It may enhance the survival of the hatchlings, because the hatchlings get pushed into the northern Gulf of Mexico and they have good places to survive. But in order to nest over there, it's also a place that's a really good habitat for predators. And so what you're nesting on is a heavy predator beach. And so what you do is you evolve mechanisms for reducing your predation. All right. And that is nesting during the day, nesting during windy days, doing a very quick nest where you get up and out, etc. And the other part of that question is, if you are going to nest in that big a group, you definitely can pick up and dig up somebody else's nest. And what we did is we put not only drones, but we put cameras, GoPro, wide angle GoPros out on the beach, and we'd analyze it. And this is where we get all the turtles. There'd be 50 or 60 turtles on the beach. And I would get undergraduate students as my image recognition system. And I'd say, follow each turtle and tell me what it's going to do. And when they did that, what they found was that in the high density areas, up to 80% of the turtles came up. They checked it out and said, I'm coming back later. And they'd go back in the water and they wouldn't nest. And what you'd have is up to 80% false crawl rate. And we think they're just coming back later or going to other areas of the beach. On low density areas, you have very few false crawls. And so they've got a built-in mechanism for kind of facilitating these arabata nesting. And the arabata nesting resulting from potentially predation.
There's one more question here we're going to try to answer before wrapping up. Heather says, this is a fabulous presentation. Thank you. Do you know why the National Marine Fisheries Service Head Starting program for turtles in Galveston was discontinued? Because she volunteered there in the 90s.
Oh, wow. Okay. The thought process there was the population. And again, I didn't make any of those decisions. I was on one of the panels and looked at that. I think, and this is my personal opinion, I think the overall thought process on the head starting, there was no doubt that Donna Shaver was picking up some Head Start turtles that were coming back. Okay, so can Head Start turtles survive? Yes. Okay, can Head Start turtles reproduce? Yes. Does Head Starting work better than natural? Maybe, I'm not sure. That we didn't have a good control on, just like releasing little hatchlings. But the point was they were protecting the nesting beach. The population was starting to come back. And there was, I want to say there was a pretty good thought process going that a lot of people felt that the proper way of bringing the turtle back was protecting its natural environment and let it do naturally. And so I think it was just kind of a switch towards, hey, let's let it go natural rather than manipulate. That's not to say the manipulation wasn't doing any good. I think it was doing good, okay? But at the same point, what they wanted is a natural, and they're doing the same thing with loggerheads and things like that in Florida. It's like, hey, if we've got enough turtles out there, let's let them do it on their own and not have to have, humans intervene. Yeah.
All right.
So are we about, so that's probably the last of the questions. So let me, I'll just take a minute to say a few words and wrap up here today. So first of all, thanks to Dr. Wibbles for sharing this amazing and ongoing conservation story about the Kemp's ridley. I mean, it's just an incredible story. And the species has an incredible biology that we've learned, they're continually learning about as well. I want to thank Kelly and Cassandra for keeping us organized today. And on behalf of the AZA Sea Turtle Safe Program and our 16 program partners, I want to thank all of you for joining us today. And for additional information, feel free to contact us. And I think Kelly's going to pull up some information there now on the three of us and our contact information. So if there was anything we couldn't get to today, or you want to follow up with more information about our SAFE program, feel free to contact us as well. Again, thanks so much for joining us today. We're really excited that we were able to do this on World Sea Turtle Day. And thanks to all of our presenters and our hosts. Have a great rest of your World Sea Turtle Day. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye.